So,
in terms of historical precedent, we might also want to look at some of the more recent shootings as well. We've already mentioned a couple of them. The reason is because when you see, okay, we don't have a lot of hard evidence. What we have is circumstantial regarding what happened at Sandy Hook. But when you put it together with the same kind of things that are said in previous mass shootings, particularly in recent ones, the similarities between them are really striking.
They are really striking, but what actually is more striking is the fact that I have a list here of that I found of school shootings in the past 16, 17 years. It goes back to 1996. And there are about 65 of them. And when you read through them, what kind of stands out, well, I'll let you try and figure out what stands out here. 1996, one example, 1996, Moses Lake, Washington, 2 students and 1 teacher killed. 1997, Alaska, principal and 1 student killed. 1997, again, there's 65 of these things. West Paducah, Kentucky, 3 students killed, 5 wounded. 1998, 1 teacher, John Gillette, killed, 2 students wounded. 1999, 1 teacher, 3 students wounded by a 17-year-old student. 2000, 1 teacher killed by, it just goes on, 1 teacher killed, 2 students, 2 students wounded, 1 teacher killed, 1 student, 1 teacher. Except when you get to, so basically all of them, 90% of them are of that nature. 1 student killed, 2 students wounded, 1 teacher killed, etc. Except for some very notable ones that stand out for obvious reasons, because in all of these other ones where 1 and 2 students were killed, it's the same kind of teenage, early 20s or teenage person, a student usually, or former student, that goes into the school and just loses it basically and goes in and fires off a few rounds, kills a few people. But the ones that stand out are the ones where you have the same type of student, same age roughly, who goes in, but it's not 1 or 2 students, it's 30 students, all shot 3 times in the head, and a couple of dozens wounded.
Yeah.
For example, that was more or less what happened in Virginia Tech when the guy Cho went in and basically went postal. And I mean, that's a very, very strange in itself. It's a very strange shooting. It's not the average shooting. It's there's a lot of strange details around that, including the idea of more than 1 shooter. There were reports of more than 1 shooter at Virginia Tech. And you see, that's the thing. That makes sense. When it's 1 or 2 students killed, there's never any reference to 2 shooters or more than 1 shooter. Because there was, I mean, for when one student walks in and kills 1 or 2 students, that's all it is. He kills them and then he kills himself, or the police come, or somebody overpowers him. There's never any reference to more than 1 shooter, because it only takes 1 person to shoot 1 or 2 people and then to be either tackled or whatever. But in all of the small number of mass shootings by these kind of lone gunmen, kind of disturbed student scenarios, there is invariably reference to more than 1 shooter by eyewitnesses or even by police. And it makes sense. That makes sense, because these kind of mass shootings don't fit with the other shootings. And they don't fit as a 1 person, as a lone gunman shooter, because everybody who knows anything, and people have stated it after most of them, people who are aware and who know how to use guns and know the problems and the expertise that's needed to use guns properly, are all amazed that these young guys with no training can walk in and kill people with such expertise and such such accuracy. So, you know, I mean, this isn't crazy conspiracy. This is a natural and kind of rational thought process. It occurs to us anyway, as being normal. You know, two shooter. Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure there were two shooters involved in that, because that one guy supposedly with no gun training killed 30 people. So, and the same was true about the Fort Hood shootings, although that wasn't a school shooting. But again, in that there was
at Fort Hood we had something like 60 or more people being hit. I'm not sure how many fatalities there were, but there were several descriptions from people at the scene. These would be not just passers-by. These eyewitnesses would have been ranking U.S. Army officers, describing 2, 3, I think in one case a fourth person being involved at the Fort Hood shooting, which we now know was pinned on one fall guy, Malik Hassan, I think his name was.
Hassan, yeah.
But what these, particularly the recent mass shootings, what they have in common is these multiple reports of more than one person from credible sources who have no reason to make this stuff up. And what they all then have in common is that the official narrative quickly becomes one of just a single lone gunman having pulled it off. And it stretches credibility. As Joe's pointing out, we can understand that somebody fires in rage at one or two people, but
to go in and methodically
for James Holmes in the Aurora, Colorado shooting, I think he hit 100 people, which technically makes it the worst mass shooting.
Yeah, in terms of casualties and
in terms of casualties, on his own, 100 people. In this particular case, there were not just reports from eyewitnesses describing. I think Joe's mentioned a couple of them earlier. There's not just eyewitness reports of a second person, but other completely anomalous things that make you go, what? So, for example, the police officer who booked, or who either found Holmes first or who booked him, that is, who took him to the police station in Aurora, Colorado on the day, he described James Holmes as being completely out of it. That he was staring into space, and that it was like there weren't normal emotional responses. And we can probably relate to that because we've all seen either a photo or video footage of Holmes with his weird dyed orange hair
and his glazed over eyes
in a courtroom the next day.
And his eyes.
He's just zoned out of it. It's like he's not aware of what's going on.
He said to his cellmate. Well,
that was interesting. This report came up just before, pretty much 2 weeks before Sandy Hook. There was a strange report about James Holmes, the alleged lone gunman of the Colorado shootings, in which his cellmate at the prison he was taken to that day, a guy called Stephen Unruh, said he'd had a conversation with James Holmes in which Holmes told him that, and I quote, he felt like he was in a video game during the shooting because he wasn't on his meds. He also said that nobody would help him. Most interesting, though, is that he told his cellmate that he had been programmed to do it by an evil therapist.
An evil therapist.
That's weird.
That's very strange. I mean, we've already mentioned the other anomalies about Holmes, that he was found in his car.
Well, yeah, the physical anomalies that don't add up.
Don't add up, and the fact that, I mean, again, there was evidence at Aurora of two people shooting. And this, like we're saying, this is a common theme at these mass shootings, that there were reports of two. And the point is that there are always these reports of police looking for or eyewitnesses having seen more than one shooter, and they are always at these mass shootings, and they are never at the dozens, the vast majority of other shootings where only 1 or 2 people are killed. And it makes sense. One person is all it takes to go and shoot one teacher and a couple of kids. It takes more than one person to go in and execute 32 people. When you're dealing with the same type of person with not a lot of, no expert arms training, no, and I don't know. I mean, it's just we're trying to be logical here, and but you're not allowed to be logical. You're not allowed to think logically about this. The whole point is you're meant to think emotionally. But anyway, getting back to Holmes and his scary therapist,
his evil
therapist that made him do it. When you look at these people, Holmes, he's been on meds, he's disturbed. There's evidence that he's got some psychological issues.
He was actually seeing a bona fide
therapist
at his university.
Adam Lanza supposedly had Asperger's, don't know, but clearly also had some kind of psychological issues. The guy Joe from Virginia Tech also was on meds and had a track record of having psychological issues. I think Hassan also had been.
I think so. I think Hassan, the alleged lone gunman at Fort Hood, was undergoing counselling, and also he had an interesting involvement in psychotherapy himself. But that may be.
Yeah. Well, that would put him in the picture.
Yes.
That would give someone easy access to him. But the point here is that the point we're kind of building up to, or trying to get at, is to kind of sum up. We are not looking at Sandy Hook in isolation. We're looking at Sandy Hook in context. And as we said, well, we didn't say actually yet, but as we're going to say now,
go for it.
Most people are aware, at least in the back of their minds, if they don't admit it to themselves, most people are aware of the idea that the CIA, for example, or some branch of intel agencies, etc., carry out kind of covert operations, and that they are to some extent above and beyond the government.
They have a big, long, wide track record of doing it abroad in foreign countries.
Yeah.
And we do know that covert operations have taken place domestically in the US in the past.
Yes. So we're not looking at Sandy Hook in isolation. We're looking at it in the context of past shootings that we've just been talking about and the problems with those past shootings. And we're also looking at it in the context of, is it possible? This is the way we're looking at it. The place we've arrived at in terms of how we see Sandy Hook is in this context, and also in the context of the question, is it possible that a person could be mind programmed to either carry out a shooting, or to do anything, to carry out an assassination, to carry out a shooting, or just to simply be somewhere at a certain time, involve themselves, to essentially be the fall guy or the patsy. I think most people listening to this show anyway will be aware that is a possibility, and that, for example, most people are aware of the Project MK Ultra, which is a code name for covert research operations and experimenting in behavioral engineering of humans. And this was part of the CIA Scientific Intelligence Division. This was going on from officially from the 60s and into the 70s, and then officially was supposedly stopped, but with no reason to believe that it was stopped. So the idea is that the CIA, and this implicates the CIA and implicates the CIA as an agency that